Hey guys, this video has been inspired by recent releases by the amazing Sega Lord X, to whom I reached out on Twitter and sadly still haven't heard from. That said, since he doesn't really cover Amiga content at all, I figured he wouldn't mind much if I used similar to his formula for Commodore's system. Anyway, while I was working on my history of Amiga gaming videos, I've rediscovered many games I forgot about and found some new ones I never even knew of before. So it's clear that my earlier top 10 videos instantly became totally outdated and should be remade. But before that happens, I believe this video may serve as a sorta guideline to what are the best games on the system in each genre. So let's get into it. I'm not much versed in baseball simulations. Perhaps because I grew up in Europe and it wasn't really as popular here as football, aka soccer is. Not to say that I'm much into football either. My personal sport of choice would probably be either competitive munching on anything fried bacon based, or collecting games I'll never find time to play. Hard choice. Anyway, Earl Weaver's Baseball is a game that did not end up in my top 10 Amiga sports games video, because I never knew it even existed. But now I do, so here it is as a runner-up in its full glory, offering most of 1980s real-life baseball parks, current at the time roster of players, and ability to change it all up, as a built-in editor allowed for unparalleled at the time creativity. To the point that you didn't even notice that the game itself looked like a week-old smelly sandwich found in a gutter. Don't judge the book by its cover though. Why did I choose arcade pool? Is that even a sport? How could it be? Well, if a hot dog speed eating contests are a sport, then pool is too, goddammit. As long as you can pit players against each other and keep score, it's a sport. I mean, I've taken part in less publicly mentionable activities that someone somewhere sometime called a sport. Anyway, as pool games go, arcade pool is perfect, and my favorite pool game to this day. There's hardly any music worth mentioning and sounds are what you'd expect from a billiards game, but it doesn't matter. Cause while the graphics may also not save the game's overall presentation, the gameplay doesn't need either to do so and stands on its own. It's a really fun title to fire up in an afternoon having a beer for a game or two against the CPU, but shines the most when there's more of you, and when you can all just have a drink, chat and run your own home tournament playing this lovely little game. What do I know about Formula cars? Well, they would not really work on regular roads anywhere outside of Monaco, because of all the speed bumps and other general state of the roads everywhere, and that's a big and. They're made of hopes, dreams and neatly folded origami sheets of paper. Cause they're so fragile that when you cough too loud around them, they just fall into pieces. All that said, our runner-up for a racing game in a form of Formula 1 Grand Prix is just an amazing simulation. In fact, it's the best racing sim to ever grace Commodore's system. And if you consider that all teams, drivers and cars could be edited by hand by players, being only limited by their imagination, the game's nearly infinitely playable. Does a bear shit in the woods? Quite honestly, if I'm to be straight with you here, I don't know. I really don't. Maybe it's in the woods, maybe it's in the river, or maybe they exclusively do it behind tents in campsites. I've never seen a bear in real life, and those that I saw on videos were either involved in scaring tourists, stealing their picnic baskets, or consoling boo-boo. Not necessarily in that order. But what I meant by this long and really off-topic intro is that there was no way any other racing game would take the cake. Lotus Turbo Challenge 2 is the one. Literally the one. I mean, there were 3 of them, but that's the one that's universally considered the best. It does everything first one did good, but better, and does nothing that the first one botched. So no fuel running as if you had a hole in your tank, and no more lap races. You're always driving somewhere, it's never mentioned where and why, but you are. You're riding ahead, beating time, same as in Outrun, period. I'd risk saying that it's a game of the road, where racing itself is more important than the destination, but that might be a stretch. Well, never mind, all you really need to know is that it's great and there's just none better. Panda Kickboxing, sorry, I said that wrong, clearly I meant Panza Kickboxing, right? Right. Well, Panza Kickboxing is in my eyes the best versus fighting game on the Amiga. It's the best technical fighter where there are no special effects, no explosions, no fire attacks and no fatalities. And I know, I understand, really. A versus fighting game without fatalities must be a mistake, and something that just slipped through the cracks and shouldn't be considered, right? Wrong. Panza is the best, and the fact that I have it here in the second spot only speaks to how much I try to be objective. And it's not easy, cause personally, I believe that it beats the winner easily. But I'm me, and I'm alone, and there's thousands, maybe millions of you, and I doubt that most would agree with me. So while all of you are wrong, and most likely overlook this amazing gem, in which you actually have to learn and react to each and every attack of an opponent appropriately to have a chance of winning, something else is actually a winner here. While I still think that Panza is better, Fighting Spirit is actually a brilliant title, in that it emulates the most popular arcade games perfectly, all within Amiga's capabilities and using system resources to their fullest. While Amiga's ports of both Mortal Kombat games were technically astounding, Street Fighter developers kinda dropped the ball, and this is why games like Fighting Spirits had a chance to shine. It's clearly based more on SNK titles rather than the big two, and features 10 unique fighters, each of them with their own set of special and basic moves. And Fighting Spirit being a game that released at the tail end of Amiga's life, or in reality a little after Amiga was long dead, but I don't want to be too dramatic here, it supported 2-button controls, which for console players may sound like nothing special, but for Amiga users at the time it was a godsend. Because for once we could minimize joystick gymnastics at that, and not memorize 17 joystick moves long combinations for special attacks, and just use simple ones with 2 buttons. Golden Axe is Sega's best port to the Amiga, and frankly one of their best ports to any of the home systems of the time. It's basically the same game as in the arcades, but remade within Amiga's capabilities. Everything that was in original is here, and is as playable as ever. It's an absolute classic that I really don't have to explain to anyone watching videos of mine, as some of the biggest titles are well known to everyone, even those who don't care for a particular genre. Kinda like Elden Ring, right? I know what it is, I know what it's all about, and I even played with an idea of buying it at some point, but then I remembered that I was not a masochist and neither want to nor have time to spend hundreds of hours chipping at a single boss, trying to figure out how to defeat him. My point is, I know what it is, even if I wouldn't touch it with a stick with a dog's poo at the end of it. Coming back to the subject at hand, why is such a great game like Golden Axe just runner-up? Well, to simply put, it's just a conversion and doesn't innovate, change or improve on original in any meaningful way. And the winner is an original, a bit obscure and not widely known title, but a real gem anyway. It is not very often that the best game in a genre on the Amiga comes from a small developer from a country that was not well known for great games, and all that at the very end of system's life. And here that's precisely the case. Doman is a game that has a lot of issues, starting with constant load times that are nightmare between each and every group of enemies, or 10-15 feet of walking distance. The game keeps loading something all the time, and if it wouldn't have came out in '95, I would have sworn that it just keeps making a local copy of the internet on floppies. Then there's the graphics, and I'll give them that, they have their own very unique charm, but they're also a definition of cringe. And finally, the game is in Polish only. I mean, no one cares about the story in walking beat-em-ups, but if you're an exception confirming that rule, then you're not gonna understand anything. Not that it matters, but Doman never received the English version. All that aside, it's a unique and very well put together title. There are 2 characters to choose from, or play in co-op for that matter, each with their own set of moves that are also weapon dependent, meaning if you change the weapons you'll get new moves and finishers. It's a definition of a hidden, even if a bit dusty, gore-covered gem. Slam tilt, slam tilt, slam tilt. Now, close to half of you are probably disappointed that it's not in the first spot. Objectively speaking, it was not an easy task to pick between this and the winner. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on where you stand, the game that won because of my bias towards it. Technically speaking, both of these are probably equally as good, but my favoritism tipped the scales. So since the cat's out of the bag, let's summarize Slam Tilt. It's easily the best looking pinball game on the system, there's no competition really. And it offers 4 tables. Mean Machines, The Pirate, Ace of Spades and Knight of the Demon. And honestly, they're all top notch. Frankly, if you're keen on a good pinball game that you could play alone or against others, there's hardly anything better on the Amiga. And you will never be disappointed with Slam Tilt. I played Pinball Fantasies on everything it ever released on. There even used to be some kind of old PC software called Pinball Simulation 3D, or something like that in the late 2000s. I don't really remember the name now, it's irrelevant anyway. I'm sure it's long gone. But it allowed for user-submitted tables to be run on it. And some kind souls remade all tables from Pinball Fantasies in it. And yeah, I played that bad boy too. To death. Even if legality of the port was questionable at best. So what makes Pinball Fantasies the best? It's because I said so. I'm obviously joking, but my bias did influence the final decision between it and Slam Tilt. In short, as most other games in the genre, it features 4 tables. Partyland, a fanfare team table and my absolute favorite of them all, Speed Devils, racing themed one, it's fast and frantic as it should be. A $1 billion game show, which is exactly what the name states, and my best friend at the time scored some sick records on it. And finally, Stones and Bones. A nightmare / cemetery themed table, spooky stuff. The best thing about Pinball Fantasies though, is that it's a complete package. Graphics and sound are both great, even if a bit less impressive than those of a runner-up. All tables are excellent and don't feature any unrealistic ramps or table elements not found in real-life arcades. And Dot Matrix minigames are fun but not distracting. It simply was the best game in the genre for a long while, up until release of Zen Pinball couple of decades later. Where's Rodland, Bubble Bubble, Dynablast or even Chaos Engine? They're not runner-ups to best multiplayer, I'll tell you as much. But Moonstone is, and it's fantastic. It's a real-time board game with beat-em-up and role-playing elements and adventure overtones. It's an explosive mixture that's really hard to beat when played with friends. Not as good when approached alone, but it's a multiplayer award contender, so we don't care about no single-player experiences here. The game's played by up to 4 players represented by 4 colored knights. And they go around the map fighting each other, challenging monsters in lairs, and an occasional huge-ass dragon that's anything but easy. Until you learn how to approach him, that is. All for treasures, gold, power-ups, weapons and armor, and most of all, those sweet experience points that can be used to upgrade your base stats. Which is also a trap that most don't know about. Because if you level up or gear up too quickly, getting way ahead of other knights, lairs will feature double the enemies for you, while your lower level opponents will still have a cakewalk over time. Your ultimate goal is to find the titular Moonstone and enter the valley in the heart of the map at the appropriate moon phase. Sounds interesting? Don't answer. For one, I can't hear you, and for two, obviously you said it sounds great. And what if I told you that Moonstone makes Mortal Kombat look like a kid's game? The amount of gore is incomparable, and it doesn't miraculously disappear from the screen either. At times it seems like your knights are knee-deep in it. Seems like I've spent a lot of time talking about a runner-up. So if Moonstone is so good, the winner's gotta be great, right? You guessed right, guys. You've called it first. I knew it. You're the best. I mean, it was obvious, but I'm glad that you knew anyway. And since I have no way of knowing other than your comments below, until you leave them for me down there, I will assume that you guessed the winner. Worms. Not many realize that it's actually an Amiga game that was ported to all other systems. Not that it's important, but yeah. And it's also the best multiplayer game on the system. No matter how I wanted to dress it, how much I love Moonstone or Rodland, there's really no competition. Worms is a mix between Lemmings, Scorched Earth and Monty Python's Flying Circus all rolled into one. And I don't know how or why, but it works great. And it proved to be a game that everyone can play and enjoy. Young and old, boys and girls, people of questionable looks, people with poor hygiene standards, those that don't brush their teeth, those that wear socks and sandals, people who enjoy smell of their own farts, and even people who straight up legit use Gwyneth Paltrow's vagina smelling candles. Spoiler, they don't smell anything like it. Not that I ever met her and could confirm, but my point stays. Worms does not discriminate. It invites anyone and everyone and serves same feeling and tasty fun burgers to them all. And apart from single buddy of mine, I've never met anyone who wouldn't enjoy a game of Worms from time to time if given a chance. And the friend I mentioned has a clinical issue of losing at anything, even quiz games. So I just assume that's the case and that he secretly enjoys Worms as well. Exit is a game that was not featured in my original top 10 best Amiga puzzle games. Not because it's a bad game, but because memory is a funny working subsystem of our bodies, if we're not enhanced with cybernetics, that is. Not that we can realistically be today as I say this, but I really don't know when you're watching the video. Perhaps in the far off future when it's just something that everyone does and no one ever forgets anything. Or you're a traveler from the future visiting us in 2020s and decided to waste your precious time watching YouTube. Whatever's the case, your secret is safe with me. Take me with you. Exit is one of the last games released by legendary Psygnosis on the Amiga before they moved exclusively to PlayStation. It's a 120 level strong, very polished sound and graphic-wise top-down view puzzler that is clearly inspired by Sokoban, but heavily expanded upon its base idea. You basically have to reach the exit of each level, and you do it by pushing the blocks adhering to each level's specific mechanics. That may feature various different kinds of surfaces, blocks, switches and bombs among others. It's not the easiest of puzzlers, but it's very entertaining. And figuring out solutions to some of those more challenging levels is really rewarding. And the winner is... not Lemmings. But why? It was, after all, my #1 Amiga puzzler in the top 10 I made in the past. Well, I've had a lot of time to ponder since then, and not gonna lie, I didn't do it. Even though I had like months worth of time, I didn't give it a single thought. But when I started working on this video, I landed on the final 3. Exit, Pushover and Lemmings. And the first 2 just felt like better choices. Sue me. Or don't, cause I can't really afford a lawyer now. Tell me off in the comments or something if you have to. I can take it. And even if I can't, you'll never know, as a true man cry alone, in the shower, curled up, fetus style. So, Pushover is our winner for the best puzzle category. I mean, it features Quaver chips in an intro, and while I never had those, they look delish, so it's gotta be a good game, right? Just to remind you all, Lemmings had no chips in its intro. I mean, how serious can realistically a game be with no product placement? Come on. Anyway, Pushover has it all. Money, women, yachts, damn. Wrong video, sorry. I obviously meant graphics, music, sound, excellent, even if a bit short earlier mentioned intro, and most of all addictive gameplay, in heaps. The idea here is dead simple. All yellow dominoes have to be knocked over, always ending with a very specific one. And since there are many different kinds of these, each with a unique gameplay mechanic assigned to it, the game, while challenging, is incredibly fun not only to play, but also work out. It's another hidden gem that should be more well known than it ever was. As Oxford Dictionary defines, a furry is an enthusiast of animal characters with human characteristics. In particular, a person who dresses up in a costume as such character, or uses one as an avatar online. Now, Fury of the Furries is nothing like that, at all. I mean, there are furries in it, but furries of a different kind. The game itself, though, is one of the most ambitiously designed and well thought out puzzle platformers. You're basically in control of up to 4 colorful furballs, and you have to work your way through trap and bodies filled levels to the exit. Yellow can shoot projectiles, big and small, red choose certain walls and floors, blue can swim and shoot bubbles underwater, and finally green has a grapple and a line, and he uses those to swing like Spider-Man over dangers and pulls blocks that are pullable. Not all furries are available in all levels, and even when they are, it's not always at the same time at same parts of these. Each level is a puzzle on its own, requiring both careful use of available furries and their respective skills, and godlike dexterity, especially in latter stages. But you're not hopeless. Each level includes at least one hidden bonus stage, sometimes more, and sometimes there are even bonus stages nested within other bonus stages. Crazy. And so is the game. Crazy good. So, if you're into platformers, you're not gonna find much better game than Fury of the Furries. That is, unless you're more into traditional platformers, cause then the next one takes the gold. I'm gonna tell you a secret, and it's a big one. Superfrog is joining Avengers this very year, 2023, in a movie releasing December called Superfrog Pog and the Mystery of Fake News. Boom! You heard it here first. Now, ain't that something you didn't expect? And good, cause it's not happening. But other than that, Superfrog is easily the best platformer on the Amiga. It features 24 huge-ass 8-way scrolling levels, divided into 6 uniquely themed worlds, each with its own design for both enemies and levels alike and corresponding well-fitting soundtrack. Additionally, there are 2 surprise horizontally scrolling shoot-em-up sections and a final boss fight with a mad witch. It's a package. Same as in Fury of the Furries, Superfrog is chock full of hidden areas, passages and coin caches, and they're all for you to discover in every single level. And enemies, while plenty, could be divided into 2 basic categories. Those that can be defeated by jumping on them Mario style or with the use of your green yo-yo like projectile, and those that just have to be avoided like fiery diarrhea, as they are pretty much indestructible death machines bent on mowing our superhero down. But if there's one thing that you should remember about Superfrog to guarantee successful play, is that each real superhero has his or her kryptonite. And for Superfrog, it's spikes. Yeah, spikes. They always, without exception, equal instant death. A successor to the first title and Amiga's answer to Metroid, Turrican 2 The Final Fight is an amazing game. It came out in an interesting time when Amiga was flooded by bucketfuls of arcade conversions, many of which looked incredible on screenshots in magazines, but played terrible. Which sadly was often the case not only with Amiga but in general, as most that we had to go off to decide if to buy a game was either by what you heard from a friend or read in a gaming mag. Which you know, often were down to writing whatever the publisher paid extra for. And I'm not trying to diss any Mac in particular here, but for the love of God, these odd times gave us Rise of the Robots and Shaq Fu. Both looked incredibly fun, even if they did not technically originated in Ariel mentioned arcades, but playing them was an entirely different case and an experience I wouldn't recommend to anyone. Still, Turrican 2, being an original Amiga game conceptualized by extremely talented Manfred Trenz, did both, looked really good and played even better. It's an 8-way scrolling Metroidvania-like run-and-gun shooter, offering huge levels divided into 5 worlds. It displays more sprites on the screen at once than I'd seen in any game at the time, apart from Lemmings perhaps, and dozens upon dozens of weapon upgrades. All running super smooth at frantic and difficult to master pace. But while difficult, Turrican 2 is not unforgiving or unfair, and eventually mastering its mechanics and gameplay loop is really rewarding. All that said, it's not however the best run-and-gun on the Amiga. The title goes to Ruff'n'Tumble, starring Ruff Rogers, a hero I never heard of before, or for that matter, after. That is until few years ago when he resurfaced in a new game, but this time as Rad Rogers. Way to rebrand, right? Anyway, Ruff'n'Tumble was Amiga's exclusive run-and-gun console-quality action shooter. Granted, same as Turrican, it did not use simplified formula of running left to right only and allowed for 8-way movement. But it kept all the other defining traits of the genre, like, well, running and gunning. And everyone knows that they're the most important ones, right? After all, they are in the name of the genre itself. In each level you have to open the exit by collecting enough RGB bubbles and keys, which in reality translates to shooting everything that's moving, and then get to that exit. It's easier said than done, however, cause Ruff'n'Tumble, apart from the first couple of levels, gets really unforgiving quite quickly. And unless you're a joystick guru with godlike reflexes and reactions, you will have to take a bit different than expected in a genre approach, and slow down. I know what I just said. I realize it's blasphemy and how odd it sounds when talking about the game that won the best run and gun, but if you're not Hackerman, a master gamer, a PogChamp, or however else you'd like to call someone really good at what everyone else is bad at, then in Ruff'n'Tumble playing slower will actually equal to faster progress with less deaths overall. If you are really good, however, by all means, run and gun. Battle Squadron are a runner-up for the best shoot-em-up, has it all the best games in a genre do. So battle, duh, and squadrons of enemies. So for once, title did not disappoint or lie. I'm looking at you, Shaq Fu. Or no, actually, come to think of it, I'm not. The title there was spot on too. It was a huge FU to the gamers after all. Anyway, Battle Squadron is an unofficial sequel to the same year's Hybris, and it's a sight to behold. It's hard to imagine that it actually came out in 1989 on the Amiga. It's so beautiful and great sounding that it wouldn't look out of place in the arcades, in the cabinet somewhere in the corner between Silkworm and R-Type. And chances are it would have gotten similar number of plays as the other two. But we will never know. Battle Squadron supposedly offers 25 weapon upgrades, which is just unreal, as most shoot-em-ups usually kept those at under 10, and games released in and around 1989 hardly ever went over 3. It's a great game, and I did ponder for a while whether this or Banshee should be a runner-up, but eventually settled on Battle Squadron, as unlike Banshee, it actually runs on most Amigas, and not only those with heavily overhyped and criminally under-delivering AGA chipset. As I've mentioned, a runner-up for the best shoot-em-up had it all. A winner does not. There's hardly any graphics to speak of. I mean, sure, there's no shooter without graphics, but they're nothing to write home about. Unless it's gonna be a letter saying something like "Backgrounds in Deluxe Galaga are as dark as my darkest thoughts." Or something along the lines, "Most sprites in a game are as small as my bank account balance." Stuff like that. Sound and music wise, well, first is okay, appropriate for the genre, and that's as much as I can say about it. And second, well, I would never know, as I always turn it off, cause it's not great in my opinion. Some may love its music, not the case here. But, and I'm sure you expect a butt here of some sort since it's a winner, right? But it's all irrelevant, because Deluxe Galaga is more playable than virtually any other shoot-em-up I've ever played until the release of Warblade years later. Which coincidentally was just an expanded port of Deluxe Galaga to PC. It basically features sets of 3 consecutive levels, first 2 being sort of introductions of new kinds of enemies and their attack patterns, and third being a small boss challenge in the theme of the first 2. We used to call those mini-bosses mothers back in the day, as they were just bigger versions of those basic enemies. And all these are interluded by alternating bonus and kamikaze stages. First, risk-free levels for points and bonus upgrades. Second, high-risk, high-reward waves of kamikaze enemy attacks. There are also an upgrade shop in between the levels, memory lane and meteor storm stages. And a huge boss fight every 25 regular levels. And those require a lot of pattern memorization and ninja-like dexterity and reflexes. All that to make sure that the gameplay never becomes stale. Which often does in repeatable standard shoot-em-ups. And that is why Deluxe Galaga, while looking like a tiny itty-bitty step up from an average 8-bit game, is actually easily the very best in the genre. The Chaos engine is pure chaos. Left to right, top to bottom, wherever you look or go, chaos. Chaos everywhere. Shots, explosions, grunts and shouts. Non-stop action. Chaos engine is like Gauntlet but on steroids. More inventive obviously and less arena-like in its design, with more open areas and some small puzzles to solve here and there, but other than that, like Gauntlet nonetheless. In a beautiful and stylish steampunk setting for 2-player co-op. And that's how it should be played, with a friend mowing through hundreds and hundreds of monsters as a duo of non-nonsense 80s style badasses. Not unlike those we've seen in the very best bad action movies of the era. As then, it's marvelous, fresh and really enjoyable experience. In single player, not so much as CPU takes control of your companion and it's not great at it. Still, if you have someone with you, it's an excellent afternoon right there. Now, how predictable am I? Let's run a little virtual poll here. A. Oh, so very predictable. B. Predictable, predictable, but yeah, pretty much predictable. C. I'm not predictable. And D. I'm definitely not unpredictable. Drop your answers in the comments below next to your guesses of the winner of arcade shooter category, Canon Fodder. But honestly, what else could it be? Has WAR ever been so much fun? No, it hasn't. To this day it hasn't. I mean, give me all the Call of Duties, Battlefields, Fortnites and other shooter/war-like games and no, they still aren't as fun. Canon Fodder is bar none Sensible Software's best release. In some ways it's a perfect game, very easy to pick up and start playing with nice and steady difficulty curve progress, and in the same time quite challenging to complete. In short, you're leading a unit of up to 5 soldiers through 24 different missions divided into 72 smaller phases. These range in objectives and setting they take place in, and require mastering use of special weapons like grenades and rockets, which usually come in just the right amount to complete the mission, so have to be saved for use in appropriate places. And the controls? Oh man, I haven't mentioned those yet. Whomever signed off on the mouse controls gets a virtual high five from me, plus 15 in accuracy and plus 6 in intelligence for their life stats. I can't imagine playing it using joystick. I mean, I've played it on a console using gamepad, and as much as it's possible, it's only mouse controls that make any sense here really. All in all, Canon Fodder is one of the best games of the 16-bit era and deserves to be played by all gamers even if they're not into the genre, so that they could at the very least sample its ingenuity. First time I ever saw Punk was in the arcades, couple of years after it originally released, and only because all Street Fighter 2 and Final Fight cabinets were being taken by other players. So it was a good time to look around and see what else new was there. I didn't want to waste, if that's even the right word here, but yeah, I didn't want to waste my coins on unknown games, so I hovered around checking what others were playing, and saw Punk. At first it didn't look like something a gaming guru such as myself would play, but after a little while I started getting in the loop of it, and when finally a cabinet was free, I gave it a shot, and oh boy was I in for a treat. I wasn't very good at it initially. Hold on, let me rephrase that. As soon as I laid my hands on controls, I was amazing, a true hackerman and gaming god to say the least. Just not on that day and not playing that game. Seems I can't lie to you today, guys, for some reason. But even though I didn't have a full grasp of best strategies to master it, after a couple of levels someone joined in for a co-op and that dude was something else. Face covered with blood red, ready to burst acne, greasy long hair, dark bags under his eyes and black t-shirt with some obscure metal band on it. But most of all, true madness in his eyes. Or so I thought at first, but what quickly became clear was that it was not madness at all. He carried me for so many levels, it's crazy. And that day we high-fived left and right and became best friends forever. Nope, no, great attempt, but it's once more a lie. In reality, I never saw him again. But funny enough, I did get a chance to play Punk at home. Couple of weeks later on my Amiga as a friend who lived in the same apartment building apparently had it and lent it to me. It's a great game I told you nothing about, but I suppose pictures worth 1,000 words, right? It's gonna be difficult to follow up Pang, but a winner's a winner and Rodland is just that, a winner. The best port from the arcade to the Amiga and an excellent single-screen two-player co-op platformer. Rodland could be best described as a revenge bondage BDSM simulator, where you and whomever you play it with are two sisters whose mother has been kidnapped and your only way of saving her is ruthless and electric whip-fueled extermination of thousands of cute and colorful creatures. If that sounds silly, then I've given it justice, cause the plot behind the game is just stupid. That said, gameplay isn't, and it's a treat. Simply put, you've gotta clear every of 40 available levels of all monsters, defeat the boss every few of these, rinse and repeat. There's no jumping available, but you can spawn a ladder, which will save your life more than once, believe me. And can be used either to avoid danger, get to hard to reach places, or troll your co-player opening passages for enemies to get to him, or her. Graphics-wise, Rodland is arcade perfect, quite literally. If you compare them sprite to sprite, they're near identical and look just great. Keeping Amiga's limitations in mind, that is. But the real star of the show is the sound and music design. The main score that's in the first few stages is so addictive that whenever I hear a glimpse of it, it invades my mind uninvited and stays there for months. Like a troll resurfacing in the worst possible moments just to F with me, and manifesting itself in uncontrollable, hours-long whistling sessions. It's a nightmare. But the game isn't, and you should definitely play it. Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis is an exercise in patience and dexterity, incredibly immersive story, graphical showcase on the Amiga, and also a runner-up in Best Adventure category. And it's all of those things. I mean, if you ever wondered how it is to constantly swap and juggle 11 discs that a single game is on, time after time, disc after disc, all over throughout the entire game, wonder no more. Join this hell of a ride. Pick all 11 of those bad boys and start playing, and I guarantee that pretty much two things will happen. You'll have a great time, and you'll develop a carpal tunnel syndrome, which, you know, has its upsides too. Time of work, monetary compensation, bragging rights. After all, carpal tunnel is modern scar show-off. All gaming demigods have it, and ladies love it. Or so I heard. Anyway, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis is what a third movie should have been. The story is lore-friendly and interesting. The puzzles, while more on a difficult side, are not illogical as in many other point-and-click games, so you shouldn't really ever find yourself getting lost in a trial-and-error frenzy. And since you could play the game in 3 different ways, following so-called paths, and there are 3 entirely different endings, replayability is in this definite strong point, proving once and for all that LucasArts were the masters of adventuring in the 90s. And yes, LucasArts were the grandmasters of point-and-click adventure games. There were many players on the market making games in the genre, but LucasArts was in the league of its own. And Secret of the Monkey Island, an early 90s release, is not only the very best adventure game on the Amiga, but also the best one overall in the genre for many years that came after. Personally, I haven't played better, or at the very least comparable adventures until Life is Strange and Detroit Become Human were released decades later. Secret of the Monkey Island places you in the shoes of Guybrush Threepwood, a gentleman, an outstanding fellow, a scholar, and most of all, a pirate wannabe, who'll do anything to become one. A pirate, that is, and not one that pushes bootleg game copies on floppies, but one that drinks grog, sinks ships, plunders ports, and befriends random pirates. So, a council of 3 local hardcore elder pirates sends our hero to complete series of pirate trials to prove that he's worthy. Monkey Island is full of quirky and dark humor, and many of the puzzles are based on funny interaction between either characters or objects, and will leave you chuckling whether you want to or not. A famous sword fighting scene comes to mind especially, as it's not fought with skill but with sharp tongue and wits. Monkey Island is bananas, and you should play it. Amiga RPG scene is deeply divided. Some subscribe to the notion that Ishar series are the best, others that it's the eye of the beholder that takes the cake. Some even hardcore cling to the Dungeon Master as the only true first-person RPG series to grace the machine. Personally, I lean towards Perihelion, but I doubt that many of you will support me in this notion. So, Ishar 2 Messengers of Doom, the best in the series, is our runner-up for the best RPG on the Amiga. It's a party-based first-person role-playing set on a series of islands, each of offering different and unique landscape and scenery. Your main quest is to defeat the evil sorcerer Shandar, and you can do it either with a completely new party or one imported from a previous game. Ishar 2 introduced many changes to the title's formula, like a day-night cycle with everything that it entails, meaning shops were closed at night but also nightclubs only ever being accessible after dark, or the bank building that allowed for storing of your valuables so that you did not lose all of your gold upon death. Ishar 2 is an amazing game and one of the best RPGs on the Amiga. A great runner-up, but not good enough to be... But not good enough to be the winner, that Eye of the Beholder 2 is deservedly so. It is also a first-person party-based real-time role-playing, with a small difference to earlier mentioned Ishar 2. Or a huge one, depends how important it is to you. But Beholder 2 is actually based and using 2nd edition of Dungeons & Dragons rule set as its baseline. So all fans of pen and paper RPG naturally gravitated towards this rather than other games. Don't get me wrong though, if it was just about the license, I doubt that Beholder would grab this spot. License does not guarantee a good game. I mean, just look at most early 90s movie licenses that were made into games. Most are trash at best, and some are straight up made just for grabbing as much money as possible, basing potential sales on a title and not quality of the game. Or even better, superhero games on the Amiga. I have a whole separate video on it, and there is maybe a game or two that are genuinely good, another one that's decent, and the rest is just garbage. And they're all based on licenses. Anyway, since I'm clearly getting off topic, it's not just the license. Beholder 2 stands on its own. It has great and involving story, main quest you genuinely want to complete, and puzzles that are more intricate than just pressing switches that were main fare of the first game. And presentation-wise, both graphics and sound design are great. Top for the genre for the time it released in. If you love RPGs, you can hardly do any better on Commodore's system. Red October standing by. Okay, it's clear I can't do Sean Connery. No, that sounds awful. What I meant is that it's clear I can't do Sean Connery impression. And it's sad, cause it's a classic one from an awesome movie based on an awesome book. And totally not present in the same titled pretty good game. Game that despite this long intro we won't even talk about here today. But we will talk about its direct competitor, Silent Service 2, which is my best simulation on Amiga runner-up. Actually, it's my favorite simulation on the Amiga, but I have to at least try to stay objective. So I couldn't, in good faith, place it at the winning spot. Anyway, what makes Silent Service 2 great, other than being a better game than the first one, is that it very neatly mixes its simulation aspects with really fun gameplay. Despite being a simulator of arguably one of the most intricate combat machines, it never places you in a situation where you're overwhelmed with all the options available, and just virtually 10-15 minutes with it allows you to more or less figure out without ever touching the manual what's done where and how, which is something hardly ever said about any simulations, other than the racing ones that is. So, if you're in any way interested in submarine simulations and don't want to go through hundreds pages strong manuals, Silent Service 2 is definitely the right choice. Remember Airwolf? Mid-80s cringe action TV series featuring a high-tech military copter and Jean-Michel Vincent as the main hero? Now, today I know it's trash. But back then, it was everything. Well, not back then, maybe, as I didn't watch the original run, I was a bit too young for that actually. But few years later through syndication I did, and then it was everything. Non-stop action, explosions, stupid but easy to comprehend story, more explosions, stellar cast composed of B-listers and an alcoholic, high-tech, high-power sci-fi copter, even more explosions, and most of all, the most explosions ever. Now, Gunship 2000 was just that for me. A TV dream come true on my Amiga. and while it may not have had anything to do with the series, in my mind it did. In short, Gunship 2000 is microprocess battle helicopter simulator in which you can partake in single missions or play a whole campaign composed of chains of missions, each with primary and secondary objectives assigned randomly. Which may not seem like a lot in theory, in practice it prolonged the game life considerably. All based on an underlying tug-of-war system, meaning the better you do, the more offensive the missions will be, and the worse you play, the more often you'll be placed on defense. The game offers 7 copters to choose from and a beautiful for the time presentation. If you love combat simulations, chances are you either know of it already, or you will love it after giving it a go. Now, the runner-up for best strategy is a game I love and a game I hate. Same game. UFO Enemy Unknown is a mixture of real-time global strategy with tactical turn-based combat encounters and base management if all that wasn't enough already. But most importantly, it's a tool used in supervillain training camps, testing their resolve and patience to the extreme to see whom could withstand ungodly long load times and mind-numbingly slow gameplay. And sure, I get it could be run on a very powerful A4000, but most of us had measly A500. And similarly powerful machines, and on these, UFO was painful at best and straight up torture at worst. It didn't however stop me from completing the game on my machine. Sure, it took months as opposed to days it would have taken on any average PC, but I've at least proven that I had chops to take over the world one day, and rule it with an iron hand. Anyway, aliens attacked and the Earth is at their mercy. This is where you and your orc XCOM steps in. They've got the tech, they've got the men and pretty well stocked up starter base that you personally picked the location for, and most of all, they've got you, the biggest strategy mind to ever grace the Earth. So, juggling all those base expansions, research and development of new technologies, waterboarding of captured Xenos, and even leading tactical missions is something that you'll no doubt handle with ease. If I could suggest something though, either do it through emulation or on a very powerful Amiga. And if either is not an option, just play it on PC. I know it's a blasphemy in a video about Amiga. Do whatever you want to destroy me in the comments below if you wish. If UFO was just a runner-up and what you see on the screen now clearly is not Civilization, why is The Settlers the winner of best strategy? Well, if you're a fan of a genre and give it a minute, I'm sure you'll come to the same conclusion. And it's pretty simple really. It won because it deserved to. While UFO is great, it's not good enough on the Amiga. Be it because it's too demanding or there wasn't enough attention put to Amiga's port, it's irrelevant, it didn't deserve to win. Civilization? Sure, I love it, all of them actually, and played them from the very first to the most recent one. But sadly the first Civilization, while important for gaming, is not as good and deep strategy as the latter ones are. What about Dune 2? Wasn't it good enough? No, it wasn't. It's a great game, no doubt about that, and an important milestone in gaming and RTS genre overall, but it suffers from the first-gen syndrome. It's great at what it does, but is not polished enough to be the best. And this is where Settlers comes right in. It doesn't knock on the door, it doesn't use the doorbell, it just kicks the door in and lands itself on your Amiga, basically acing everything it offers on the first try. It's a real-time strategy and city/kingdom management all rolled into one, and all its features are perfect, all on Blue Byte's first attempt. Something like that happens once or twice per decade, and we're lucky to have witnessed that with Settlers. But what does it do actually? Well, you want a kingdom builder that's both demanding and playable and also beautifully designed and presented with pixel arts quality graphics? Done, it's here. You want a deep and well-developed system of supply and demand, resource management and worker assignments? Boom, here too. But I wanna fight someone and not just build and have nothing interesting happen. Well, kapow! There are opponents that work as hard as you do to best you at kingdom management and growth. Well, maybe, but their CPU, and CPU is never as smartest. Stop. I got you. I mean, Settlers got you. It offers super smooth, super fun, simultaneous split-screen couch multiplayer. So, does anyone still think that Settlers doesn't deserve the proverbial cake? Ports of Call has been my guilty pleasure for years. Every couple of years or so I just start it up and get lost in running my own multi-million-dollar shipping empire to the ground. Or to the ocean floor. Anyway, Ports of Call is great because it doesn't serve up management in its purest Excel tables-heavy form, but spices it up with a touch of arcade, bit of randomness, and a speck of hot seat multiplayer competitive play. And the recipe to have it ready is pretty simple too. Just place its disk in your Amiga's internal drive, ponder for a second if you should get snacks, press power, and enjoy. 3 simple steps to management heaven. On the first glance, Ports of Call is just a business simulation where you manage a fleet of ride ships, balancing those profits and losses for the sake of your bottom line, all to grow your company into international transport powerhouse. And while it's factually correct, you're also responsible, if you can't afford to use help of tag or random event makes you, for docking and undocking of your ships, avoiding numerous encounters like collision courses with random icebergs, or saving shipwrecked sailors. And if you have someone to play it with, it's even better, as you get to immerse yourself in that Schadenfreude goodness. I'm not German, but that word is just the best and everyone should know it. Schadenfreude, which I no doubt butchered pronunciation of, is an experience of finding emotional joy in another's misfortune or struggle. For once, it's good to have a single word for it. If this choice of a winner is not controversial enough, the next sentence to follow this one will no doubt earn me some well-deserved dislikes. Theme Park is best played on PC. I said it, I know what's to follow, but I've done it anyway. Not only I've picked the game that's notorious for being a much weaker port than PC version was, but I also admitted it aloud and made it a winner. All in one video. Theme Park is a management simulation that lets you run your very own amusement park. And you're responsible for everything to keep the place running like a Swiss watch, and money flowing like it flies out of my wallet usually 2-3 days after getting paid. Yeah, I love to live on the edge. You'll be in charge of researching and building of all of the park attractions and rides, of hiring staff and assigning tasks to them, of setting admission prices, and even such minute details as deciding on amount of bubbles in sodas and sugar in ice cream. And it's not a joke, all that's in a game, and up to you to decide upon. Despite the cute presentation that's oversaturating your screen now, the simulation backbone of Theme Park is not thin at all, and in fact it's pretty complex. Believe it or not. There are a lot of things to micromanage and balance to keep the place as profitable as possible, and in the same time not jeopardizing your guests' health and lives. Theme Park is Bullfrog's first management game, it's full of their iconic quirky humor, but most importantly it's an incredible time to be had, even if you're not a fan of regular strategies or business simulations. A runner-up for Best FPS, Gloom Deluxe, was once a winner in my top 10 FPS Amiga Games video. That video, however, excluded all games ported from other systems, games released after 1996, and those that required RTG graphic cards. So, from my point of view, it was the best choice for a winner at the time, and should sorta give you an indication what game may actually take the W here, where there's no such limitations. Still, Gloom Deluxe, a superior version of earlier Gloom and an obvious cash grab on similarly named Doom, looks and sounds more than good for its time. And the fact that it runs on basically any Amiga as long as it has at least 1 MB of RAM is just incredible. Sure, when given higher CPU speed and more RAM and AGA chipset to munch on, it looks and runs best, but being able to play it, albeit in smaller window and lower resolution on basic 1 MB systems, is something worth highlighting anyway. But what's most important about Gloom Deluxe is that it's a blast. Fast, bloody and overall great time to be had. Especially in its cool 2-player split screen mode, which was a novelty at the time and not something seen in many FPS games on the Amiga. You know how sometimes you don't notice something at all until it's pointed out to you, and from then onwards you just can't unsee it and keep noticing it all the time? Kinda like one of Tom Cruise's teeth that's precisely centered in his mouth and just sits there directly in the middle of his face right under his nose? Or that friend of yours that keeps sighing annoyingly seemingly for no reason in response to anything that's asked of them? Which was never an issue until someone else asked about it, and ever since then you just hear it constantly all the time? Yeah, like that. Well, I have same beef with genetic species. On January 21st, 2021, a user going by the name of Lester1 on Lemon Amiga website compared genetic species to Wolfenstein 3D, just reskinned. And from that day onwards, it is and always will be genetic Wolfenstein species 3D to me. The bubble popped and I can't unsee it. That said, it doesn't change the fact that the genetic species often serves as an excellent example to show off what really expanded and powerful Amiga could pull off, especially in terms of graphical presentation. Personally, I wouldn't recommend running it on a real system, as those that are capable of showing its complete beauty at full speed would cost you a kidney, a lung, and a couple of fingers, and emulation is free and super fast on any, even potatoiest of PCs, but you do you. Technically speaking, it could even run on a basic A1200, but in reality it didn't run on it didn't work either, it was more of a backward scroll. But if you have a beefy AMI or a wallet, or are versed in WinUAE emulation, genetic species is both. Real fun to play and pretty nice looking FPS game for the time. What happens when you mix Gauntlet's gameplay and Ridley Scott's Alien movies franchise? One of two things really. You either end up with what most licensed games were, so hot garbage that's as appetizing to play as yesterday's clams are to eat. I mean, everyone can enjoy good clams, but seafood and time don't mix well, and you know it. Or you get Alien Breed Tower Assault, an excellent top-down arcade shooter that's third and final installment in Team 17's 2D series of games. You're one of two survivors from a ship that was shot down by automatic defenses of Space Barracks facility that you were going to following a distress signal. And now you're on a remote planet filled with your worst imagination nightmare-fueled very alien-like creatures, and have to shoot your bloody way through all of them to escape. There's many different paths you can take throughout the game. According to developers, there's roughly 276 different ways to complete it, so lack of replayability is not an issue with this one. Graphics-wise, it's the absolute best Amiga could offer in terms of 2D presentation by 1994, but the real star of the show is atmosphere and heavy, horror-inducing sound design. It's one not to miss, that's for sure. It shouldn't be a surprise to those who followed my channel for a while that Frontier is the winner here. It is most likely my most favorite game of all of the 16-bit era, and a title when approached on Amiga I have a very strong and ongoing love-hate relationship with. On one hand, it offers a universe worth of gameplay, thousands upon thousands of hours of fun, over 1 billion of star systems, each with their own unique planetary bodies, surface bases and surrounding space stations, dozens of differently spec'd ships with hundreds of upgrades, and countless commodities to trade or smuggle, factions, missions, ranks, and a rumor of a hostile alien race. All in an open-ended game where you have no real hard-coded endgame ending objective and can just fulfill your futuristic space life wet dream. Be it as a pirate, trader, working for the army or government, or just as an explorer of the unknown, going where no man has gone before, literally. All that in full true 3D engine. But it's not as great as it may seem, and since I've mentioned one proverbial hand, I may carry on with another. Frontier on the Amiga is clearly too demanding game for the basic 1 MB systems. I mean, that's how I sunk thousands of hours in it back then, and I will keep giving myself endless virtual high-fives for that achievement, for how long I've endured it like a boss, but there's no other way of putting it as just painful, and I can't recommend playing in this configuration. A1200 with some fast RAM or any Amiga with a turbo card is a must to enjoy it at full speed, or virtually any PC made within the last 25 years. And that's how you should play it, cause otherwise, despite the ingenuity of the game, it's a nightmare. But given powerful enough system, it's one of the best games of its era, and neither only in its genre, nor only on the Amiga. And finally we get to tackle our runner-up for best system exclusive game, Lionheart. In short, it's about a child who at only one was taken by his parents on a holiday to the heart of Africa, and by an unforeseen set of events his parents along with their guide died tragically in an after-poo wiping incident as they used those big green leaves with black spots that you should never use in unknown jungles. Always stick to the small brown ones, guys. Write it down, it's a useful lesson. Anyway, our future hero, being barely an infant and not aware of the seriousness of his situation, crawls away deeper into jungle. After a day or two, hungry and deprived of water, with a diaper full of toxic waste and no more tears to shed, he's on the verge of death. And at this precise point, a lonely lioness, recently broken up with a big-ass tiger, grabs him by his overalls and saves him, dragging him into safety. Also, all I said up to this point is beyond stupid and an obvious lie. Lionheart is an action fantasy platformer and an excellent example used by many former Amiga gamers to prove that the system could run console-quality games. And no wonder, as it's true technical achievement. Just look at the graphics, at the multi-level parallax scrolling backgrounds and how fast it runs. And all of it is on a basic 1 MB system, no less. The levels are varied and interesting too, and even using a very unique approach to difficulty. If you pick a higher tier of it, levels may not only feature more challenging enemies but also redesigned environments and expanded areas. So why isn't it in the first spot? Two reasons. First, there's something off about Lionheart's control scheme. I mean, you get used to it after a while, but it's noticeable nonetheless. And second, and more important actually, the winner is just plain simple a better game. If you ask an average Amiga gamer what were the best exclusives for the system, most would probably name games like Banshee, Ruff'n'Tumble, Deluxe Galaga, Perihelion, Amber Moon, maybe Arabian Nights or Shadow Fighter. Highly unlikely, but possible they'll mention Lost in Mine or even Heartlight. There are some more obvious games that come to mind too, but not our winner. And I'm not much surprised, honestly. While it's not a bad looker, it doesn't stand up above others. It sounds okay too, but it's not memorable enough for you to find yourself humming or whistling its tune unknowingly. It's so obscure in fact that out of all people I know personally that had an Amiga, there's only 3 of us who ever heard about it. Me, myself and I. Hardly a crowd, but at the very least all of them seem to know their Amiga games quite good. Yeah. Anyway, Benefactor is a very unique puzzle platformer, a cross between Lemmings, Sleepwalker and any other generic action platformer. And while it may sound like an odd mix, it's so well designed and executed that you won't stop playing for a second to ponder about it. You're controlling a small, just a handful of pixels in size character, whose main task in every level is to save tiny red creatures that are kept locked away in captivity. Each level is a different logic and platforming challenge, and to succeed you must master use of both, your dexterous fingers and keen mind. When you save those little red fellows, they direct themselves straight for the exit. But as they do, you can pick them up and send or throw them whichever way you deem best. So, higher than you could ever jump yourself, or towards a short path that you would never fit through. And it's worth exploring those options actually, as many switches and other gameplay mechanics are hidden in such places. And those red little men are actually a key to completion of most, if not all levels in the game. You just gotta set them on the right path. Benefactor is best understood when played and not talked about. And it's also when you can really appreciate its ingenuity. So don't waste any more time, track it down and try it out. You'll love it. Toasty! While less serious and more on a lighter side than my usual releases, hopefully this video helped you pick your next Amiga game. I'm obviously aware that longtime Amiga fans knew about most if not all of these, after all these are seemingly the best in their respective categories, but those that are new to the system and look for a gaming inspiration should definitely be able to use this video as a source of excellent gaming finds. So if you liked what you saw, smash those like, subscribe and bell buttons below. They're few mouse strokes away and a huge help for me. And if you're feeling more generous, why don't you take a look at my Patreon? There's quite a few levels to pick from, and I always post updates there on what I'm working on, what's coming, and what I would like to change or improve upon. For today, however, this is all, so have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Peace.